Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're getting into the real secret sauce behind tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and all the others. It's a single concept that changed everything called self-attention, and honestly, it's the engine that's driving this entire generative AI revolution.
Okay, so let's start with the question that really stumped AI researchers for years. How do you get a machine to actually understand context? Like in the sentence, the delivery truck blocked the driveway, so it had to be moved. How does the AI know that it refers to the truck and not the driveway? Well, the answer, it turns out, was teaching the AI how to focus.
Now, to really get why this solution was so groundbreaking, you first have to understand just how bad the problem was. Before about 2017, AI models, well, they had a really bad memory and a very, very narrow view of the world. I want you to imagine trying to read a complicated book, but you can only read one single word at a time. After each word, you have to close the book, try to remember that word, and then open it for the very next one. It sounds impossible, right? Well, that's pretty much how the old models, called recurrent neural networks or RNNs, had to work. It was all sequential, one after the other, which was a huge bottleneck. The new way with transformers is completely different. It's like being able to see the entire page or maybe even the whole chapter all at once. And these bottlenecks they were crippling. I mean, that one word at a time thing wasn't just slow. It created this huge memory problem. There's this thing called the vanishing gradient, which basically meant that the model would forget what was said at the beginning of a sentence by the time it got to the end. This made it impossible to see how ideas connected over long distances. And that's the whole key to understanding, right? So AI was for sure stuck. And then, in 2017, everything changed. A team of researchers published this paper with a pretty simple title: Attention is All You Need. And it didn't just suggest a little improvement, it introduced a totally new way of thinking about how machines could process our language.
So here was the core idea. They completely flipped the script. Instead of forcing the model to read word by word, what if you just let it look at the entire sentence at the same time? And what if you let it decide for itself which words are the most important for understanding any other word? That is self-attention. It's the AI teaching itself what to pay attention to.
To make this all feel a bit more intuitive, let's use a simple metaphor. Just imagine that every single word in a sentence is a member of a team, and they've all come together for a big meeting to figure out what the sentence really means. So let's peek inside this meeting. To make it work, every single word gets 3 different jobs. Now, behind the scenes, these jobs are actually complex mathematical vectors. But you don't need to worry about that. Just think of them as giving each word a specific set of instructions for the meeting. First up, every word forms a query. You can think of this as the word asking a question to everyone else at the table. So for the word it in our truck example, its query would be something like, "Hey, teen, to figure out what I am, what other words here are things that can be moved and could be blocking something?" Next, every word also has a key. The key is basically that word's area of expertise. It's like a label. So the word truck would have a key that says, "Hi, I'm a noun, I'm a physical object, I can be moved, and I can block stuff." It's essentially raising its hand to answer the query. The word driveway also has a key, but its key says something different, like, "I'm a place, I can't be moved." And finally, every word has a value. The value is the actual substance, the real information that the word will share if it's called on. It's the detailed contribution the word makes once the meeting decides it's relevant. And this is where it all comes together beautifully. The query from the word it is compared against the keys of every other word in the sentence. Truck gets a really high score, right? Driveway gets a very low score. This score then decides how much of each word's value gets passed along to create a new, context-rich meaning for the word it. It becomes this weighted average of meaning, but it's heavily influenced by the truck. And here's the absolute genius part. This whole process is just a series of matrix multiplications, a kind of math that modern computer chips, GPUs, are built to do incredibly fast. This one idea solved the speed problem and just shattered that old, slow, sequential bottleneck. So this powerful but actually pretty elegant idea of a team meeting for words didn't just improve AI models. It led to a completely new architecture that just threw out the old rulebook.
This was the birth of the transformer, and the impact was just immediate and explosive. In just a couple of years, all these different flavors of the transformer started popping up. You had models like BERT that became masters of understanding text. And then you had models like GPT that were amazing at generating new creative stuff. It was like a Cambrian explosion for AI. And what's so powerful here is just how adaptable this whole idea is. See, self-attention isn't some one-size-fits-all tool. The architecture can be tailored for different jobs. If you just need to understand text, like for sentiment analysis, you use an encoder-only model, like BERT. If you want to create new text, you use a decoder-only model, like GPT. And for something like language translation, you use the full encoder-decoder setup. Okay, so we've gotten into the mechanics, but why should you, as a developer, a business leader, or even just a curious user, why should you care about all this technical detail? Well, because it's what directly powers the AI capabilities that are totally transforming our world. This is really where the rubber meets the road. Self-attention is what lets an AI write a 5-page report where the conclusion actually remembers what was in the introduction. It's how it can translate an idiom correctly, even if there's no direct word-for-word match. And it's how it can debug a program by understanding that a function defined way up on line 50 is being called down on line 500. And you can see the impact clear as day right across the board. For marketing, it generates ads that are actually relevant. In software, it's speeding up coding and debugging like crazy. And in data analysis, it's a beast. It can take hundreds of pages of dense reports and pull out the key insights for you. Self-attention is the engine driving these massive gains in productivity. Look, if you take away just one single thing from all this, let it be this. For decades, we were trying to build smarter AI. But the giant leap forward, it didn't come when we just made it smarter. It came when we taught it how to focus. Self-attention is simply the art of focus, but scaled by the incredible power of a machine. And this leaves us with a final, and I think pretty profound question. By mastering this ability to see connections and context inside our own data, our language, our science, our code, we've created this incredibly powerful new tool. So now that AI has finally learned to pay attention to our world, the biggest question isn't really about the technology anymore. It's about us. What will it help us notice next?